distributes the remaining wealth after that to those that we owe money to, and then to our families that inherit from us. So, who can inherit from you? Any Muslim who is alive at the time of your death. The closest family members will inherit before those who come after them. Who cannot inherit from you? A person who does not share your faith. A person who's guilty of murdering you. That seems kind of intuitive, right? Or a person who was enslaved. Remember that these came up at a time in the world when slavery was predominant, and unfortunately still very predominant in certain areas of the world. But this is essentially to prevent wealth from going and being misused. Those that do inherit in one of two ways. They inherit either a percentage that's been fixed in the Quran given their position in the family, or they inherit the residual after the percentage has been given. And there are 7 essential situations for inheritance given men and women in the family. In 3 of those situations, women inherit more. In 1 situation, they inherit equal. And in 3 situations, men inherit more. And who takes more or less is depending upon their function and responsibility in the family at the time of receipt. If we were to stay on that topic, we could stay here until next Tuesday. So we don't have that amount of time. So we'll just, that's what will suffice. Now, it's important, though, with the rules of inheritance that anybody who wants to reflect that in your will is able to reflect it in a way that is not cumbersome and can easily be understood when the will is drafted. There's another Islamic tradition that is also found in the United States, but it's not a legal document. It's something called a family declaration. And a family declaration is essentially you writing a letter to those who are going to handle your funeral, your family members, and you give them the advice to fear Allah, to remain faithful to Islam, to be people of prayer and sadaqah, to not differ and dispute with each other after they've passed away. And this is a long-standing tradition that great imams of this ummah have done. Everyone from Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, who had written advice to his children when he passed away, to Al-Imam al-Ghazali, who wrote a book called Ayyuha al-Walad, O Young Boy or O Young Son, a very beautiful book that's been translated into English, to Abu al-Walid al-Baji, one of the great scholars of Islamic Spain, who wrote a book to his twin boys, and to Abu Hanifa and Shafi'i, all these other scholars who wrote basically the advice that they wanted to give their families and friends at the time of death, to say the things then that they can't say now. A question that comes up frequently is, how do I get a will? And there are essentially 3 ways that you can get a will. The first is to write a holographic will. And that does not mean, a 3D image. No Star Wars stuff here, right? Holographic will means that you've handwritten it. So you take out a piece. If you don't have a will right now, I want you to do this today or at least by tonight. You take out a piece of paper, and at the top you write, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I, Joe Bradford, the undersigned, leave all of my property and assets to be distributed to my family members according to the rules of Islamic law. And I ask my family to consult with Sheikh Nu'man Beg of Institute of Knowledge to ensure that that's being done correctly. And I advise my family to fear Allah. And then you sign it, like you sign any of your checks. And then if you have a voided check or something with your signature or handwriting on it, keep that with it. What would happen if you passed away tonight? It would count as you having passed away with a legally valid will. It's not the strongest form of wills. But if your family brought it to the court and say, look, my father, my mother wrote this down. Here are samples of their handwriting. The judge is going to say, okay, we're going to need somebody to verify that this is his or her handwriting. Yes, they verified it. All right. So-and-so in the family, or whoever was mentioned, is going to take care of and divide the inheritance as your late relative saw fit, instead of the state stepping in and dividing it according to state law and charging you money for doing it. So they will assign someone and then charge you money for doing it. So you want to avoid that. So how do you do that? If you don't have anything, get out a piece of paper today and write out your will. Can't be typed, it has to all be handwritten and then signed like you sign a check. Secondly, you can use a local lawyer. Now the challenge and the risk that you take with using a local lawyer is that sometimes lawyers say, well, I can draft a will, but I don't know necessarily how to reflect your Islamic values and the types of division of inheritance in your will. I don't know how to do that. So you run the risk of kind of spanning considerable costs for that lawyer to learn on the job, or hiring someone to act as outside counsel to do that for you. Now, if you have two situations, you still want to use a local lawyer, okay? If you have considerable net worth, okay, right now, you know, inheritance taxes only really kick in after $11 million. But I would say that if you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and you have 5 million or more, and you see your wealth growing considerably into old age, then you would want to then go ahead and get a lawyer to draft your documents. Why? Because one thing that they're going to do is make sure that you have protections against inheritance taxes and unnecessary fees and expenses. And then you can bring in someone to consult on the Islamic portion for them. I do that kind of service, and there are several other people that do that here, and you have a wealth of knowledge here in Southern California that can also help. The third is to use a website like mywasiya.com. Now, full disclosure, I'm a co-founder of this website. How did this website come about? I was once praying Isha at a local masjid, and a brother stopped me at the door, and he said, I need a will. And I said, well, I've studied wills and trusts Islamically. I can tell you what needs to be in it, but I can't draft it for you because I'm not a U.S. lawyer. He said, okay, but I still need a will. I said, okay, I understand that. If you have a lawyer, put me in touch with him, and then we'll work that out. So I was about 20 minutes late walking out of the masjid. So who was I meeting? My friend, who was a lawyer. He's sitting in the car. He's, dude, where were you? I'm sitting here for like 20 minutes. I said, this guy stops me at the door. He says, I need a will. I told him what happened. He goes, same thing happens to me all the time. But it's the opposite. I have to say, I'm a lawyer. I can draft it, but I'm not a sheikh. I can't tell you what should go in it. So he and I got to talking. And what we found was, we did a use case study of about 3 years, looking at all of the different services, all of their different costs in the 50 states. And what we found is that Muslims were paying exorbitant amounts of money to get very basic estate planning needs met. There's no excuse for any Muslim to pass away intestate without a will, except for the fact that in their minds, they think that it has to be so expensive because either lawyers are charging them way too much, or because in our mind, in order for things to be valuable, they have to be difficult and expensive. That's a real problem. Like, we've had people come to our website and say, this was too easy, something must be wrong. It's like, no, we made it easy for that purpose. Because this is not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's a one-size-fits-most. We don't believe that people should have to pay thousands of dollars in order for them to be able to protect their wealth and the inheritance they leave their children. So the average will is $100. If you live in a community property state, together it's about $125, right? The idea is we want Muslims to be protected. So you can use this website. You go online, click Get Started Now, put in your email, your name, asks you questions about who you are, who your family is, what type of property you have, how you want your guardianship of your children, if you have them, to be handled, who do you want to be your personal representative when you pass and handle, the will and the distribution, and if you want your funeral expenses to be taken out of your will or you have a separate source, and a few other questions that are in there as well. And after this online interview, we had an algorithm built that takes your answers, your state laws, and the rules of Islamic inheritance, puts it all together as a custom document for you. Not a template that fills in the blanks, but something that's custom to your situation, right? So you can use this, or you can use any other service. If you were to walk away with anything today, I want to impress upon you the importance of using something, because the number of people that pass away without a will is staggeringly high. And when you pass away without a will, you make it exponentially more hard for your family to be able to access the wealth that you've left for them. So, if you pass away without a will here in California, if I recall the latest statistics, the delay from the time you pass away to any money is seen by your family is about 4 years, minimum. Minimum. And that's for a person who has maybe a home and a retirement account. We're not talking about if they have, several properties. So you want to be careful and not leave, more responsibilities for your family. You want your family to be, crying for you and praying for you, and not, cursing you and angry at you. May Allah make us have good deaths and make our families happy with us after we pass. So if you were to take a screenshot today of anything, please take a screenshot of this. These are 7 things that are necessary for a complete estate plan, and we'll talk about each one. We already talked about the family declaration. We said it's not a legal document. You don't have to sign it, but it's something that you should leave your family so that they can have something after you pass that gives them advice. Who do you want to pray over you at your janazah? What kind of things do you want to tell your family? Number 2, a legally valid Sharia compliant will. Why do we mention both? Because you want it to be legally valid, because if you live in a state and you draft a will not according to the state laws, it can be invalidated. And if you live in a state and you try to do some kind of amalgam of expressing what your Islamic values are, but it becomes too confusing, your will can also be thrown out. And that's happened in the past with previous attempts at wills that were drafted by Islamic societies, right? Where it became so cumbersome because they weren't, the detail was not created by experts. It got to court, and the court said, why are you giving me 100 pages of, if a man dies and he has 3 grandmothers and a grandmother and a sister, right? Like, I don't need all of that detail. So what we did with my wasiyah is we tried to essentialize everything and cascade the inheritors so that anybody who looks at the document can tally up how much your assets are, tally up who your remaining family members are, and then apply the rules accordingly. Thirdly, an advanced medical directive. This is not a complicated document in drafting. It's a complicated document in actually thinking about what you want to put in it. What is an advanced medical directive? It's a document that tells your family how you want to be cared for in the instance that you are incapacitated or on your deathbed. If I were to average the number of calls that I get yearly, and in Houston where I live, we have a very large medical center. So if I were, now there are about 2 or 3 times a year where I get the most calls, but if I were to average every month, I get about 2 calls a month. So about 24 families a year that are calling distressed, saying, I don't know what my mother or father wanted me to do in this situation, and I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to be my parents' killer. I don't want to murder my family member. Heartbroken because they didn't know how their parent wanted to pass. Did they want family there? Did they not want family? Did they want life support? Did they not want life support? What is quality of life to them? So someone could say, for example, quality of life to me is, I don't want any life support, regardless of what happens. Or they might say, I want 2 physicians to come and verify that I'm not going to survive. And then after that, don't spend all of the families. I've seen families go into bankruptcy trying to save a relative who is on their way out. Death is not an event, it is a process. And so we have to be realists about that. So an advanced medical directive will essentially tell your family what you want to happen for your medical care. Next is a durable power of attorney. Durable power of attorney allows your family member to step in on your behalf and make financial decisions when you are incapacitated or unable to. And this can apply at the time of death. It can even apply at the time of travel. Many of us go for Hajj and Umrah, correct? And we leave our family members behind or our homes behind. And you might entrust a family member to take care of them, but they don't necessarily have the legal capacity to do so. Having a durable power of attorney would allow them to do that. If you were passing away, and this is a story that I've told several times, a physician in a community here in the U.S. decides he wants to get estate planning documents done. He's a multimillionaire, or he's a millionaire at least, and working as like an oncologist or something. And he feels that paying, somewhere between $3,000 to $5,000 was just too much money to protect the millions that he had. So he doesn't do anything, any documentation. Leave it for Allah. It's going to be cared for. Now, another problem is that he never involved his wife in the finances. He went back home, he married her, he brought her back over, he gave her a credit card, he said, use this card, charge whatever you want, and I pay the bills. So one night he's on call, he goes to the hospital, he's hit by a drunk driver, permanently comatose. Vegetative state. No hope for him to come out. They can leave him on life support, or if they pulled the life support, he's going to pass. So his wife is just doing what she always done, mourning, but also just swiping the credit card. She wasn't involved in paying the mortgage. She didn't have access to the bank accounts. She had access to nothing. Eventually, what happens? Credit cards start to default. The bank account starts to deplete. He's not working anymore. The money starts shutting off. The home is going into default. She's told, you need to sell the home so that you can salvage any money that's left in it. She tries to go and do a sale on the home, finds out that they won't allow her to sell it. Why? What's that? Yes. No, she's on the deed, but who else is on the deed? He is. So both of them have to sign. So they said, ma'am, you can't sell your home. Your husband's not here to sign. She said, well, my husband's in a coma. Okay, well, you can only do one of two things. You can bring us proof that you're allowed to sign on his behalf, durable power of attorney, or you can pull the plug. If you pull the plug on your husband, then you'll be able to sign. I'm not going to murder my husband. Right? See, so these are real situations. Now everybody says, this is not going to happen to me. I don't have a problem with it. How many of you here own a car? How many of you have seatbelts in your car? How many of you wear your seatbelt when you get in the car? How many of you like wearing your seatbelt? Right? And even if you don't like it, you do it. Why? Because I don't like accidents, but I like to be prepared for them. So anyone who says estate planning is not necessary, ask them, do you like accidents? No, you don't. But you wear your seatbelt, you take your car insurance, and you prepare yourself for these situations. Number 5 is a trust. And notice that I put in parentheses here, if needed. Now in California, because of, California is kind of unique in that you have beautiful weather, but horrible courts. And, getting through probate courts can many times take a very long period of time. So to avoid that, many people will use a trust to be able to put their home in the trust so that they can avoid the court system as far as the home. Is it always necessary? No, it's not. But is it done many times? Yes, it is, especially if your home is of a certain value. So don't believe anyone who says you must have a trust irregardless. No, you need a trust if there's a specific asset that you're trying to protect, like if you're in Cali and you have a home of significant value, or if you're a high net worth individual, or if you have a special needs child. So we've already talked about these two, right, of having a home of worth or having high net worth. If you have a special needs child, I implore you, I beg you, I beseech you, I'm asking of you sincerely and endearingly to please make arrangements for their benefits early on, for their guardianship early on, for a special needs trust to be created for them early on. Because the longer you wait and the closer they get to 18 years of age, it will be harder for you to do that. It will cost more, and it will be harder. If they are over 18, it will be significantly harder for you to prove that you should be in control of their guardianship as well as any wealth that comes their way. Meaning that if you pass away and you leave them money through inheritance, that inheritance might actually disqualify them for the benefits necessary for their medical care. And this is very state and county specific. So you want to have a special needs attorney who is in your county who can tell you what needs to be drafted for that. Right? Sixth is a marital property agreement, also known as a transmutation agreement. And this is not a prenuptial, it's not a postnuptial. It is an agreement where you and your spouse say that for specific accounts, forms of property, earnings and debts, you will either share them or not share them. And if you share them, how much? So for example, in some states, there's 9 states in the United States, where when you marry, by default, you're considered to be sharing everything that you have, both the money that you earn and the debts that you incur. Now the danger is this. You might marry somebody who's extremely financially irresponsible. So a lot of times marital property is framed in the idea of, well, you don't want to give me community property because you don't want to share the money that you're making. Quite frankly, many women in our community are earning just as much or even more than men sometimes. So that's certainly not an issue of just men versus women. Plus, unfortunately, we do have people that are not up front with the way that they're earning and spending money. And I've seen several cases where the husband is taking out credit cards in both he and his wife's name, maxing them out, and then when challenged says, I can't deal with this anymore, I want a divorce. So now what happens? They share. Why do they share the debt? Because it was taken out in both of their names. You were married to them, you should have known. How do you prevent this? Islamically, men and women are autonomous. They have their own financial rights and their own financial responsibilities. It is the men's responsibility to care for the family. It is the woman's responsibility to care for the family and maintain them emotionally and in the home. And then there are certain things that are shared. But it is not the same as this common law idea of the unity theory of marriage, that two souls become entwined as one, and as it is on earth, so shall it be in heaven, and you are married forever to this person. That's not how it is. That's a very Christian, Catholic idea of what marriage is, which is why in other faiths, divorce is actually forbidden for them. Like in Catholicism, you're not allowed to have a divorce. You have to get an annulment, and in order to get an annulment, you have to send a letter all the way to Rome, and the Pope has to approve it. This actually happened to a friend of mine. All right, his older sister wanted to get a divorce, and they were like, yeah, absolutely not. We don't do that. We're Catholic. And so she wanted to remarry, and she had to wait for almost 5 years on that letter to reach, the Pope and then come back to them, right? So the point is that the marital property agreement essentially says, my husband and I, we're not going to share in all of our assets and all of our debts. Why? Because when we die, we will inherit from each other, but we're not going to be one unit. We have our separate rights and responsibilities, and different people inherit from us when we pass away as well. So the marital property agreement allows you to avoid a lot of disputes that can happen because of commingling of property. 7 is life insurance. And life insurance, notice that I put between parentheses, if needed. Yes? Yeah, I guess we can. I mean, I wish I would have known the time before, but messing my flow state. Yeah, we can stop here. We can come back and talk about this last point of life insurance, inshallah ta'ala.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
الله أكبر
الله
سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله سمع الله لمن حمده.
If everyone can take your seats, we'll have Sheikh Joe wrap up his presentation and give some time for question and answers. Our goal is to finish by 2. So let's try to keep our questions very general, not very personalized. You can set up a consultation. What's your website again, Sheikh Joe? JoeBradford.net. That's right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, bismillah. So let's continue. We wanted to talk now about life insurance. Now, I know that anytime this topic comes up, the very first thing that people think in the back of their heads is, I heard it was haram. And so I won't go into all of the details about this, but I did a video on my YouTube channel. If you type in the words, Joe Bradford, is life insurance haram? It's the only video that's going to come up. In the beginning of the video, I say, it's going to be a short video, about 3 minutes, and now it's 20 minutes long. So it has a lot of detail there. Suffice it to say, though, there are certain questions that we need to ask when we talk about, is life insurance allowed or not? Number one is, how is the company that is offering you a policy structured? Insurance companies are generally structured in one of 2 ways. Either they are structured under the principle of mutuality, mutual insurance companies that say, we, like-minded people, are going to pool our wealth and invest it and reinvest it and then pay claims out of that pool for our mutual benefit. We're not trying to make money for shareholders. Our stock is not being traded on the NASDAQ. We're not trying to enrich anyone else. We're simply trying to manage the funds of people that need coverage. Which is why, with many mutual insurance companies, you'll find that at the end of the year, if there's a surplus, then they'll actually send you a check. Or they'll reduce your premiums for the next year. The other type of insurance company is a conventional shareholder-based company, which means they're saying, we're a company that manages and issues policies. However, once you give us your money, it's no longer yours. We are going to pay out the claims if you meet the threshold for our payment of those claims. And any money that we make off of this is not going to go back to you. It's going to go to our shareholders that invested with us. So the general consensus of scholars is that this form of conventional shareholder insurance is haram. Why? Because you are enriching others for something that they had no risk and liability in. They're simply akal amwal al-nas bil-batil, devouring other people's wealth without right. Whereas mutual insurance as a structure is permissible. Why? Because you are sharing in the risk and you are sharing in the reward. Now the second question that comes after that is, if a company is a mutual insurance company, then how do they invest the insurance pool? And what will you be paid from? So essentially you want to look to find a company that has a good corporate social responsibility rating or ESG rating, or preferably is investing in a Sharia compliant manner. Now, while investing in a completely Sharia compliant manner may be few and far between, if you find a company that invests with strong ethical principles, you're going to meet anywhere from 80 to 85 to 90% of what's expected when investing in a Sharia compliant manner. And so therefore, it may not be the optimal choice, but it is a better choice than going to a conventional company or from having nothing at all. And then thirdly is, do you actually have an insurable interest in what you're taking a policy out for? Meaning that if I had a company and you worked for my company and your wife didn't work for my company, but I took an insurance policy out on your wife so that if she were to pass or get injured, I would get paid, would that be ethical? No. Companies used to do that. They don't do it so much more now. They used to do things like that. What does it mean to have an insurable interest? It means that if something or someone is harmed, passes, or is hurt, then I have an interest in making that whole or making sure that things get back to how they are. So if I own a home, I have an insurable interest in my home because if it gets damaged, I may not be able to live there. So I want to make sure that it's protected by having a home insurance policy. If I have my personal health, I have an insurable interest in making sure that my health is taken care of in the instance where I can't support myself. If I pass away and I have debts and I have family members to support, then I have an insurable interest in making sure that those debts are paid and the family members are supported. Right? So life insurance is not a necessity. It's not something that across the board you absolutely have to have. Some people do. So for example, if you are a family member, the only person in your family that lives in the United States right now, you and your spouse live here, maybe with your children, maybe you don't have children, you have no other family here. It's quite different than a person who has generations and generations of family around them. A person who works in a high-risk industry, let's say, for example, a physician that works with communicable diseases and in the ICU, is very different than a data analyst that works from home in the amount of risk that they are exposed to every day. So after these three questions are asked, it then becomes a very personal question about how much do you actually need and do you need it at all. Some people don't need life insurance. Some people simply need to budget their money properly and invest what they have at the end of the month. Sometimes what happens is insurance salesmen, because they make commission off of your first payment, will try to sell you insurance. Why? Because they'll give you the highest cost insurance. I'm gonna give you the one that's gonna cover you the most. And if you want to change it in 6 months, you can do that. Why do they do that? Because the commission's not going to be repealed. They're still going to make the same amount of money even if you change the policy. Okay? So you want to be careful that you actually have a need for insurance. Number two is that you're doing everything else to provide for your family, like budgeting appropriately, spending appropriately, investing appropriately. And then number three, that your risk profile is realistic. You know, if I have outstanding debt on my home, $300,000, for example, and I know that if I pass away, my family's not going to be able to pay that off, then perhaps I want to take a policy of $500,000 so that they can pay off the mortgage and have some money to live off of for a month, a few months to a year. All right? I'm not going to go and get a $3 million policy for a $300,000 debt. And that means that you have to have, a personal consultation to see what's appropriate for your situation. So in judging how much life insurance you need, essentially you're going to ask or answer these 5 questions. How old are you? Because your age will play a role in the amount of premiums that you have to pay just because of the time that you're contributing to the policy. Are you married or not? Right? So if you're married, you might be able to get a policy for you and your wife at a discount, or you and your husband at a discount. Or if you're not married, it might be more. How many family members do you have? Do you have children? Are you looking to insure them or just yourself, who are going to be the beneficiaries? How much do you earn? That's also going to determine, from even a general financial planning standpoint, what is reasonable for you. And that's a very important point. Never think that, life insurance is a possible part of a whole financial plan, but it is not the financial plan. Many times people selling life insurance will say, well, if you just get this one policy, it'll cover everything. You'll have money if you pass away. You'll have money you can borrow against throughout your lifetime. You can use it like it's a bank. You can do this, you can do that. And in reality, they're simply trying to get you to make that first payment so that when you do, they get the commission. And if you don't pay after that, the policy fails, is repealed, and then you're left with nothing. Don't want to be in that situation. So always remember, your budgeting, your planning, your saving, your investing, your overall life plan needs to be in place, and then life insurance can come and close that gap, but it's not going to be everything and anything. And then lastly is your outstanding loans. Like I said, if you have a mortgage with an outstanding amount of $300,000, then you want to make sure that you're covering that, but you're not going extraordinarily beyond that and then burdening yourself with a monthly payment that's actually going to harm you in the long run. So those are the considerations for life insurance. So at this point, I'm going to pass the mic back to Osama, who's going to explain to us a little bit about the types of policies and why we recommend what we recommend and what you should look for. And then we're going to open the floor for Q&A, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh again. Okay. Bismillah. So, as my beloved Sheikh Joe was talking about the permissibility of life insurance, it's very important to know that this is something that he and I spent a lot of time on discussing. I mean, me personally, I've been in the insurance industry for over 12 years, and when I got into it, I only got a health license. I didn't even get life because I was under the same impression that life insurance was haram. I was familiar of other fatwa that said it was halal and stuff like that, but being in the industry, knowing how the contracts work, knowing what's involved, I stayed away from it and wasn't comfortable with it. So then when I met with Sheikh Joe, I did see his video that he talked about, and he does say in the video that this will only be 5 minutes, but mashallah, it's closer to 20. But it's very good, a very good 20 minutes, a lot of knowledge in it, mashallah. And I've watched it personally many times and took notes to make sure I grasp everything that he's saying. So now the thing is here is there are some companies that would be more Sharia compliant, like Sheikh Joe had mentioned. And any company that we do offer at Ikhlas, that we're contracted with for life insurance, is something that Sheikh Joe himself has researched and studied and has approved as a company that it would be permissible, inshallah, to sell life insurance products from them. Does that mean that all the life insurance products are okay to purchase? It does not mean that. There was 3 products that in our discussions and comparing and discussing all the different products that are available that he gave the green lights on, inshallah. So the first one would be a whole life policy. This is a traditional life insurance policy. I'm not always going to recommend this because it's really expensive, okay? And it would be much more wise to take the second option that I was talking about. How this plan works is it has a permanent death benefit. So essentially, I mean, it's lifelong. So if you take it in your 40s or 50s, I mean, you'll still be paying for this if you live to your 70s, 80s, and even 90s. Now, of the positives of it is it has a savings component. In a sense, it builds cash value